The sound of children's laughter beneath the sprawling oak was the first thing Thomas Sullivan heard when he rode into Petaluma, California, that scorching August morning in 1878. And it stopped him dead in his tracks, because he had never expected to find joy in a place that looked so desperate for rain. He had come to town for supplies, nothing more, but curiosity drew his horse toward the massive tree where a young woman sat on a weathered blanket surrounded by 7 children of varying ages. She held a worn book in her hands, and her voice carried across the dusty street as she read with such passion that, even from a distance, Thomas found himself leaning forward to hear better. "Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire," she said, closing the book and looking at each child with warmth in her eyes. "Now, who can tell me what that means?" A freckled boy of about 10 raised his hand eagerly. "It means learning should make us excited, Miss Hannah." "Exactly right, William. Learning should ignite something inside you, make you hungry to know more." She smiled, and Thomas felt something shift in his chest at the sight of it. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back in a simple bun, wisps of it escaping in the heat, and her dress was plain calico, faded from washing. But there was something luminous about her, something that made the dusty street seem brighter. Thomas dismounted and tied his horse to the hitching post outside the general store, but his attention remained on the makeshift classroom. The children were writing now, scratching away on small slates with pieces of chalk that looked nearly used up. The woman moved among them, offering gentle corrections and encouragement. "That is beautiful penmanship, Sarah," she said to a little girl who beamed at the praise. "Keep practicing just like that." An older woman emerged from the mercantile, and Thomas tipped his hat to her. "Afternoon, madam." "That schoolteacher under the tree, she do this often." The woman, Mrs. Peterson, followed his gaze and sighed. "Every day, rain or shine, though we have not had much rain lately. That is Miss Rebecca Hannah. Came here 6 months ago from San Francisco, said she wanted to teach children who needed it most. The town has no school, no money for one, so she just started teaching them under that oak tree. Does not charge a penny, though Lord knows she could use the money herself." Thomas watched as Rebecca helped a small boy sound out a word, her patience evident in every gesture. "Where does she stay?" "Rooms at the boarding house, works evenings serving dinner there to pay her rent. That woman works harder than anyone I have ever seen, and for what? Half the parents do not even understand why their children need learning when there is work to be done." Something about the situation bothered Thomas deeply. He had built his ranch from nothing over the past 8 years, working until his hands bled, saving every penny. He had a good spread now, cattle that brought decent money, and a house that was too big for one man. He had everything except a reason to come home at night that made his heart feel full. "The children need a proper schoolhouse," he said, more to himself than to Mrs. Peterson. "Need and having are 2 different things in Petaluma, Mr. Sullivan. The town council says there is no money in the budget." Thomas made his purchases quickly, loading supplies onto his horse, but his mind was elsewhere. He found himself walking toward the oak tree just as Rebecca was dismissing her students for the day. The children scattered in different directions, calling out their goodbyes, and she waved to each one until she noticed Thomas standing a respectful distance away. "Can I help you?" she asked, wariness creeping into her voice. A woman alone had to be careful, especially in a rough town like Petaluma. "Thomas Sullivan, madam," he said, removing his hat. "I own a ranch about 5 miles north of here. I could not help but notice you are teaching these children out in the open." Rebecca's chin lifted slightly, a defensive gesture. "I am aware of my circumstances, Mr. Sullivan. If you have come to tell me the children are being distracted from their chores, I have heard it before. No, madam, I came to ask if you would allow me to build you a schoolhouse." The words hung in the air between them. Rebecca stared at him as if he had spoken a foreign language. "I beg your pardon, a schoolhouse. Proper building, 4 walls, a roof, windows, desks for the children, a real chalkboard, maybe even some new books." Thomas surprised himself with how much he had already thought this through in the span of 15 minutes. These children deserve better than learning in the dirt. Rebecca's eyes, he noticed, were the color of honey in sunlight, and they were currently shining with unshed tears. "Why would you do such a thing?" "Because it is the right thing to do," Thomas said simply. "And because I have the means and the knowledge. I built my ranch house myself, and I have a crew who works for me. We could have a schoolhouse up in a month, maybe less." "I have no money to pay you, Mr. Sullivan." "Did I ask for payment?" Rebecca looked down at the worn book in her hands, and Thomas could see her fighting some internal battle. Pride was written all over her face, the kind of pride that came from making your own way in the world. He understood that. He had the same kind of pride. "Why?" she asked again, softer this time. "You do not know me. You do not know these children." Thomas put his hat back on, tilting it against the afternoon sun. "My mother taught me to read, Miss Hannah. She died when I was 12, and my father put me to work in the fields. I forgot most of what she taught me, had to teach myself all over again when I was older. By then, I had lost years I could have been learning. These children should not lose those years." Something shifted in Rebecca's expression, the wariness giving way to cautious hope. A schoolhouse would change everything for them. "But Mr. Sullivan, I cannot accept charity. If you build this school, I will find a way to repay you. Teach those children well. That is all the repayment I need." He nodded to her and turned to leave, then stopped. "Where would be the best location? Here by the tree, or would you prefer somewhere else?" Rebecca looked around, considering. "The tree provides good shade, but if we had an actual building, it would not matter as much. Perhaps closer to the center of town. Many of the children walk quite far already. I will speak to the town council about a plot of land. Good day, Miss Hannah." "Good day, Mr. Sullivan." "And thank you. I do not know what to say." "You already said it." He mounted his horse and rode off, feeling her eyes on his back the whole way down the street. That evening at the boarding house, Rebecca sat in her small room and tried to make sense of what had happened. She had come to Petaluma with such hope, believing she could make a difference in children's lives. The reality had been harder than she imagined. Parents who could not see the value in education, children who were pulled away for harvest work, and the constant struggle to teach without proper materials or shelter. There had been days when she questioned everything, when the sun beat down so hard she could barely think, or when rain forced her to cancel lessons altogether. She had nearly given up twice, nearly returned to San Francisco, where at least she could find work as a governess. But then a child would read their first full sentence, or solve a mathematics problem they had struggled with for weeks, and she would remember why she stayed. Now a stranger was offering to build a schoolhouse, asking nothing in return. It seemed too good to be true, yet there had been something in Thomas Sullivan's eyes that made her want to believe him. A steadiness, a quiet strength that reminded her of her own father before he passed. The next morning, Thomas was at the town council meeting before the sun had fully risen. Mayor Davies, a portly man with mutton chops and a perpetual expression of mild confusion, listened to Thomas's proposal with increasing interest. "You want to donate the materials and labor for a schoolhouse, and you want nothing from the town." "I want a plot of land, deeded to the town for educational purposes. That is all." Council member Harrison, who owned the largest farm in the area, leaned forward. "What is your interest in this, Sullivan? You do not have children. Why do you care if these kids learn their letters? Because an educated population benefits everyone, Harrison. Your farm will need workers who can read contracts and do figures. My ranch needs hands who can follow written instructions. And more than that, these children deserve a chance to make something of themselves. Pretty speech, Harrison said, but I still think there is something else going on here. You got your eye on that schoolteacher. Thomas kept his voice level. My motivations are my own. Do you want a schoolhouse for this town or not? Because I am offering it free and clear, and that offer will not stand forever. Mayor Davies cleared his throat. There is a plot on Oak Street, belongs to the town, been sitting empty for years. I do not see why we could not use it for a school. I will draw up the papers. I need them today. I want to break ground tomorrow. Tomorrow, the mayor sputtered. That is awfully fast. Summer will not last forever, and those children need shelter before winter comes. I will have the papers drawn up myself if it speeds things along. By noon, Thomas had the deed in his hands. He rode out to his ranch and gathered his 3 ranch hands. Miguel, a skilled carpenter from Mexico, James, a former slave who had worked his way west after the war, and young Pete, who was only 20 but could work like 2 men. Boys, we are building a schoolhouse in town. I need you full-time on this for the next few weeks. Your regular wages plus a bonus when it is done. Miguel grinned. For Miss Hannah's school, my Maria talks about her all the time. She is teaching her to read. That is the one. James, you still remember how to frame a building. Like riding a horse, boss. You never forget. They loaded a wagon with tools and headed into town. Thomas stopped by the oak tree where Rebecca was teaching multiplication to a group of students using pebbles to demonstrate. She looked up as his shadow fell across the blanket, and her eyes widened when she saw the wagon behind him. Mr. Sullivan, got the land approved. We start building today. Rebecca excused herself and walked over to the wagon, looking at the lumber and tools. I did not think you meant immediately. No time like the present. I figure if we work steady, we can have the frame up in a week, walls and roof in 2 more, and finishing work done before September. September, that is less than a month away. Then we better get started. Thomas jumped down from the wagon. Do you want to see the plot? Make sure it meets with your approval. Rebecca glanced back at her students, who were supposed to be practicing their numbers but were instead watching the exchange with open curiosity. Class, independent study for 10 minutes. I will be right back. She walked with Thomas down Oak Street to an empty lot that was larger than she had expected. It sat on a corner with good sun exposure and was close enough to the main street that children could reach it easily. It is perfect, she breathed. More than perfect. I was thinking we could orient the building to catch the morning light, put windows on the east and south sides, leave the north side solid for a chalkboard. Rebecca turned to him, and Thomas was struck again by how the sunlight caught in her hair. Mr. Sullivan, I do not understand why you are doing this, but I want you to know it means everything to me, to these children. Call me Thomas. And like I said yesterday, it is just the right thing to do. Still, I feel I should contribute somehow. I could help with the building. Thomas smiled for the first time since they had met, and Rebecca found herself thinking it transformed his entire face. He was handsome in a weathered way, with dark hair that touched his collar and eyes so blue they were startling against his tanned skin. She guessed he was around 30, maybe a year or 2 older. Have you ever wielded a hammer, Miss Hannah? Rebecca, and no, I have not, but I could learn. Tell you what, you keep teaching those children, and when the schoolhouse is done, you can help me decide how to arrange the inside. Fair enough, fair enough. They shook hands, and Thomas felt calluses on her palm that spoke to harder work than just teaching. This was a woman who was not afraid of labor, who did what needed to be done. He found himself admiring that. The building began the next day. Thomas and his men worked from dawn until dusk, and word spread quickly through Petaluma. By the third day, other men had started showing up to help. Miguel's brother brought his sons. James's friend from the livery stable came after his shift. Even Harrison, the council member who had questioned Thomas's motives, showed up one evening with fresh lumber. "For the floor," he said gruffly. "Cannot have those children sitting on dirt." Rebecca brought lunch to the work site every day, baskets packed with sandwiches and lemonade that she somehow afforded on her meager earnings. She always stayed to eat with them, sitting on a stack of lumber and asking questions about the construction. "Why do you angle the supports that way?" she asked Thomas one afternoon. "Helps distribute the weight of the roof. See how they form triangles. That is the strongest shape in building." "I did not know that. Now you do." He took a long drink of lemonade, grateful for the break. The August heat was brutal. "You know, you could teach the children about this. The mathematics of construction, the geometry of it." Rebecca's face lit up. "That is a wonderful idea. Learning by doing, by seeing practical applications. Thomas, you are brilliant." No one had ever called him brilliant before. Thomas felt heat rise to his face that had nothing to do with the sun. Just common sense. "No, it is more than that. You see connections between things, ways to make learning real for them." She looked at the rising frame of the schoolhouse, already taking shape. "This building is going to change lives. I hope you know that." "Our building," Thomas corrected. "You are the one who will fill it with learning." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, something neither was quite ready to name. Rebecca looked away first, standing and brushing dust from her skirt. "I should get back to the children. Sarah is watching them, but she is only 14. "Sarah Martinez, Miguel's daughter?" "Yes, she is one of my best students, very responsible. Miguel will be proud to hear that." Rebecca gathered the empty lunch basket and started to leave, then turned back. "Thomas, would you come to dinner at the boarding house tomorrow evening? My treat, to thank you properly." "You do not need to thank me, I know, but I would like to, please." How could he refuse those honey-colored eyes? "What time?" 6 o'clock. "I will be there." Thomas watched her walk back toward the oak tree, her skirts swaying, and Miguel chuckled beside him. "You have it bad, boss. Do not know what you are talking about." "Sure you do not." "Come on. We have work to do before you go getting all dressed up for dinner tomorrow." That evening, Thomas stood in front of the small mirror in his ranch house bedroom and tried to remember the last time he had cared what he looked like. He trimmed his beard, put on his cleanest shirt, and even polished his boots. Then he felt ridiculous for going to such trouble and almost changed back into his work clothes. But the thought of seeing Rebecca, of sitting across from her at dinner, made him keep the good shirt on. The boarding house dining room was modest but clean, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of roasting chicken filling the air. Rebecca met him at the door, wearing a blue dress he had not seen before. It brought out the color of her eyes. "You look nice," she said, then blushed. "I mean, thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me." They sat at a corner table away from the other boarders, and for the first few minutes, conversation felt awkward. They had talked easily at the work site, but this felt different, more formal somehow. "Tell me about your ranch," Rebecca said, breaking the ice. "How did you come to own land in California?" Thomas relaxed slightly. This was easier ground. "Came west in 1870 after working in a factory in Boston for 6 years. Saved every penny I could, wanted to make something of myself. Bought 100 acres of scrubland that no one else wanted and spent the first year just making it livable. That must have been difficult. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. There were nights I slept under the stars because I had not built a shelter yet, days when I thought I had made the biggest mistake of my life. He paused, remembering. But then the first spring came and I saw what the land could be. Started small with cattle, built up the herd slowly. Now I have 200 head and 300 acres. You should be proud. You built that from nothing. Same as you are doing with your school, starting with nothing but determination. Rebecca smiled. I suppose we are similar in that way. Though I came to Petaluma for different reasons than you came to California. What reasons were those? She looked down at her plate, pushing food around with her fork. I was engaged in San Francisco, to a man my father approved of, a banker. He was wealthy, respectable, everything a woman was supposed to want. But he did not want me to teach. He said it was beneath the station of his wife to work with poor children. So you broke the engagement. I gave back the ring and left the city the same day. My father has not spoken to me since. Her voice was steady, but Thomas could hear the pain beneath it. He says I threw away my future for a foolish dream. Teaching children is not foolish. No, it is not, but it has been harder than I expected. Some days I wonder if I made the right choice, if I am really making a difference. Then I see William reading to his little brother, or Maria teaching her mother the alphabet, and I know I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Thomas reached across the table and briefly touched her hand. You are making a difference. Anyone can see that. The touch was brief but electric. Rebecca pulled her hand back, but her eyes stayed on his. You make a difference too, Thomas, not just with the schoolhouse, but in how you treat people. Miguel told me you paid for James's wife to travel out here from Georgia, that you found housing for them when no one else would rent to them. Miguel talks too much, Thomas muttered, but he was pleased she knew. He admires you. They all do. I just try to be decent. My mother raised me to believe everyone deserves respect, regardless of where they came from or what they looked like. Seems like a simple principle, but not many people follow it. They talked through dinner and dessert, the conversation flowing easily now. Thomas learned that Rebecca had grown up in San Francisco, the only child of a shipping merchant. Her mother had died when she was young, and she had been educated by private tutors. She had always wanted to teach, had dreamed of it since she was a girl. My mother was a teacher before she married, Rebecca explained. She used to tell me stories about her students, how rewarding it was to watch them learn. I always wanted to honor her memory by doing the same. She would be proud of you. I hope so. I like to think she would understand why I had to leave San Francisco, why I could not marry a man who would cage me. The word cage struck Thomas as particularly telling. Rebecca Hannah was not a woman who could be confined or limited. She needed space to spread her wings, to pursue her calling. Any man who loved her would have to understand that. The thought surprised him. Love. He had known her for less than a week, but even as he thought it, he knew something was growing between them, something that felt inevitable and right. When dinner ended, Thomas walked Rebecca to her room on the second floor. They stopped outside her door, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Thank you for dinner, Thomas said, and for the conversation. I enjoyed it. So did I, very much. Rebecca hesitated, then said, Would you like to have dinner again? Next week, perhaps. I would like that. But next time, let me pay. You should not be spending your money on me. I can afford one dinner, Thomas. I know you can, but I would like to take you to dinner properly. As a... He struggled for the right word. As a man who is courting you, if that is acceptable. Rebecca's breath caught. Courting? If I am being too forward, I apologize. But I think you know there is something between us. I would like to explore what that might be, properly, respectfully. For a moment, Rebecca just looked at him, her eyes searching his face. Then she smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. Yes, Thomas, I would like that very much. They said good night, and Thomas rode back to his ranch feeling lighter than he had in years. The stars were bright overhead, and the night air was cooling after the heat of the day. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out, and his horse's ears pricked forward at the sound. Life was good. Life was full of possibility. Over the next 3 weeks, the schoolhouse took shape rapidly. The frame went up, then the walls, then the roof. Windows were installed, real glass ones that Thomas ordered from San Francisco at considerable expense. The floor was smooth pine boards that Harrison had donated, and the door was solid oak that Miguel crafted with his own hands. Inside, they built rows of desks, a proper teacher's desk at the front, and shelves for books along one wall. The chalkboard was the finest Thomas could find, mounted on the north wall just as planned. He even ordered a globe and maps to hang on the walls. Rebecca came every evening after dismissing her students, watching the progress with tears in her eyes. "It is more than I ever dreamed," she kept saying. "So much more." Thomas and Rebecca had dinner together twice more during those weeks, once at the town's only restaurant and once on a picnic that Rebecca packed. They talked about everything, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Thomas told her about losing his mother, about the hard years working in the factory. Rebecca told him about growing up privileged but lonely, about always feeling like she did not quite fit in the wealthy circles her father traveled in. "I think that is why teaching means so much to me," she said during the picnic, as they sat by a creek on Thomas's property. "These children, they do not care that I grew up with money or that my father was important. They just care that I show up for them, that I believe in them." "You do more than show up. You pour your heart into them. Is that not what we are supposed to do? Give everything we have to what matters most?" Thomas reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, letting his hand linger on her cheek. "You are remarkable, Rebecca Hannah." "I am just doing what I believe is right." "That is what makes you remarkable." They were sitting close together on the blanket, the creek babbling beside them, birds singing in the trees. Thomas leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Rebecca did not pull away. She leaned in too, and when their lips met, it was soft and sweet and perfect. When they broke apart, Rebecca was breathless. "Oh, oh," Thomas could not help but smile. "I have been kissed before, but never like that." "Like what?" "Like you meant it, like it mattered." She touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. "Thomas, I am falling in love with you." The words hung in the air, brave and vulnerable. Thomas cupped her face in both hands. "I am already in love with you, have been since I saw you teaching under that tree. I just did not have the courage to say it." They kissed again, deeper this time, and Thomas felt something click into place in his chest. This was it. This was what he had been missing all these years. Not just a woman, but this woman with her fierce intelligence and generous heart and stubborn determination. "Marry me," he said when they broke apart again. Rebecca laughed, surprised. "We have known each other less than a month, I know. It is fast, maybe too fast. But I know what I want, and I want you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and come home to you every night. I want to support your teaching and watch you change lives. I want to build a life together, Thomas." Rebecca's eyes were shining. "I want that too. But I need to know you understand who I am. I will not give up teaching, not for any man. I would never ask you to. Your teaching is part of who you are, and I love who you are. And I need my own money, my own independence. I cannot be a woman who depends entirely on her husband. The town should pay you a teacher's salary once the school opens. I will make sure of it. You have thought about this. I have thought of little else." Thomas took her hands in his. "Rebecca, I am not asking you to be less than you are. I am asking you to be everything you are, and let me stand beside you while you do it." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Then yes, yes, I will marry you." They sealed the promise with another kiss, and in that moment, everything else faded away. There was only the two of them, the sound of the creek, and the feeling that they had found something rare and precious. The schoolhouse was completed the last week of August, just as Thomas had promised. The whole town turned out for the opening, even those who had been skeptical of education. Mayor Davies gave a speech about progress and the future. Harrison spoke about investing in the next generation. Miguel's wife wept openly at the sight of her daughter sitting at a proper desk, but it was Rebecca's speech that brought everyone to tears. "This building represents more than wood and nails," she said, standing in front of her students in their new classroom. "It represents belief. Thomas Sullivan believed these children deserved better, and he made it happen. But more than that, it represents what we can accomplish when we come together for a common good. This school belongs to all of us, and the children who learn here will carry forward what they gain into the world. They will be the ranchers and the shopkeepers, the mothers and the fathers, the leaders of tomorrow. And they will remember that someone believed in them enough to build them a proper place to learn." She looked directly at Thomas, standing in the back of the room. "Thank you does not seem adequate, but thank you for everything." After the ceremony, as people were filing out to see the rest of the building, Thomas pulled Rebecca aside. "I talked to Reverend Wells. He can marry us Saturday if you are still willing." "Saturday? That is 4 days away." "Too soon." Rebecca looked around the schoolhouse, at the children excitedly exploring their new desks, at the shelves waiting to be filled with books, at the whole beautiful space Thomas had created. Then she looked at the man himself, solid and strong and true. "Not too soon at all. Saturday is perfect." They were married in the new schoolhouse, surrounded by the entire town. Rebecca wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Peterson helped her make, and Thomas wore a new suit that he bought special for the occasion. Miguel served as best man, and Sarah stood up with Rebecca. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When Reverend Wells pronounced them husband and wife, and Thomas kissed his bride, the children cheered so loudly the sound could be heard all the way down the street. The wedding breakfast was held outside under the oak tree where Rebecca had first taught her students, and there was music and dancing and more food than Thomas had seen in one place in years. Harrison gave them a milk cow as a wedding present. Miguel built them a beautiful wooden chest. James and his wife gave them a quilt that had taken months to make, but the best gift came from the children. William stood up, his freckled face serious, and presented them with a book. "We all wrote in it," he explained. "Stories and poems about what the school means to us. So you would always remember." Rebecca opened the book with shaking hands and read the first entry. "Miss Hannah taught me to read, and now I can read to my baby sister. Thank you for never giving up on me. William P." She could not read anymore through her tears. Thomas took the book and flipped through the pages, seeing the careful handwriting, the heartfelt words. Some of the children had drawn pictures. Maria had written a poem in both English and Spanish. "This is the most precious thing anyone has ever given me," Rebecca said, hugging William and then gathering all the children around her. "I love you all so much, and I promise to keep teaching you, to keep believing in you, for as long as you will have me." That night, Thomas carried Rebecca over the threshold of his ranch house, which was now their ranch house. He had spent the past week preparing for her arrival, cleaning everything until it shone, putting fresh flowers in the bedroom, making sure she would feel welcome. "It is not fancy," he said, setting her down gently. "Not like what you grew up with in San Francisco." Rebecca looked around the main room with its stone fireplace, simple furniture, and wide windows that looked out over the ranch. "It is perfect. It is home." They stood in the middle of the room, suddenly shy with each other despite the wedding bands on their fingers. Then Thomas pulled her close and the shyness melted away. "I love you, Mrs. Sullivan," he whispered against her hair. "I love you too. More than I can put into words. Then show me." And she did. The first months of their marriage were full of joy and adjustment. Rebecca taught at the schoolhouse 5 days a week, and Thomas worked the ranch. In the evenings, they would have dinner together and talk about their days. Rebecca would share stories about her students' progress, and Thomas would discuss ranch business and ask her opinion on decisions. "I am thinking of buying more cattle," he said one night in October. "The market is good right now, and I have the grazing land." "What kind of investment are we talking about?" "About $500. It is a risk, but I think a good one." Rebecca thought about it, mentally calculating. "We have been saving, and the town council approved my salary starting next month. If the market holds, we could make a good profit. But if it drops, we would be in a difficult position. So you think I should wait?" "I think you should do what your instincts tell you, but maybe start smaller. Buy half as many cattle, test the market." Thomas considered this. "That is smart. Less risk, but still allows for growth." "You have a good head for business, Rebecca. My father did teach me something useful, even if he did not intend to." They decided to host a Christmas celebration at the schoolhouse, inviting all the families. Rebecca organized the children into performing a nativity play, and Thomas built a small stage at the front of the room. The women of the town brought food, and the men brought instruments for music. The night of the celebration, snow fell softly outside, rare for Petaluma but magical. The schoolhouse glowed with candlelight and children's laughter filled every corner. Rebecca stood at the back, watching William confidently deliver his lines as Joseph, and felt Thomas's arm slip around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "Me too." He kissed her temple. "I have something to tell you. The town council wants to expand the school next year. They want to build an addition, add more classrooms. They asked if I would oversee the construction." "Thomas, that is wonderful. What did you say?" "I said I would do it, but only if they agree to hire a second teacher to help you. You work too hard as it is." Rebecca turned in his arms to face him. "You are constantly thinking of others. How did I get so lucky?" "I am the lucky one. You make everything better just by being in it." They kissed, surrounded by warmth and light and the sound of children singing carols. It was perfect. In March, Rebecca began feeling unwell in the mornings. She tried to hide it from Thomas at first, not wanting to worry him, but he noticed everything about her. "You barely touched breakfast again," he said one morning. "Are you sick?" "I do not think I am sick exactly." Rebecca looked up at him, nervous and excited. "Thomas, I think I might be with child." For a moment he just stared at her, then a grin spread across his face so wide it made her laugh. "Really? We are going to have a baby?" "I think so. I want to see the doctor to be sure, but all the signs are there." Thomas picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, his eyes were shining. "A baby. We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" "Happy does not even begin to cover it. Are you? I know this might complicate things with teaching." "I am thrilled. And I can teach until the baby comes. Plenty of women work while expecting." She paused. "Though we will need to think about the future. I want to keep teaching, but I also want to be there for our child. We will figure it out together. That is what marriage is about, right? Solving problems together." The doctor confirmed the pregnancy, estimating the baby would arrive in late October. Rebecca told her students, who reacted with excitement and immediately began arguing over whether the baby would be a boy or girl. Maria announced she would knit a blanket. William said he would teach the baby to read as soon as it was old enough. As spring turned to summer, Rebecca's belly grew, and she had to start letting out her dresses. She tired more easily but insisted on teaching until the end of the school term in June. Thomas built a rocking chair for the baby's room and a cradle that he carved with intricate designs. "You are nesting," Miguel teased him one day as they worked on the ranch. "So what if I am? My child will have the best cradle in California. You are going to be a good father, boss. That baby is lucky." Thomas hoped that was true. He had never had much of a father himself after his mother died. His own father had been hard and distant, more concerned with work than with his son. Thomas was determined to be different, to be present, to show his child love every single day. In late August, Thomas began the construction on the school addition. Rebecca spent her days preparing lesson plans for the new school year and organizing the classroom. She moved more slowly now, her belly large and ungainly, but she was still determined to start the term in September. "You should rest more," Thomas said, finding her at the schoolhouse one afternoon arranging books. "I will rest when the baby comes. Right now, I need to make sure everything is ready. Rebecca, you are exhausted. Look at you." She sighed and sat down heavily at her desk. "I know. But I cannot bear the thought of letting the children down." Thomas knelt beside her chair. "You could never let them down. But you need to take care of yourself. How about this? We hire Sarah to help you. She is 16 now, old enough to assist with teaching. She can handle some of the daily lessons while you supervise. Sarah would be wonderful, but we cannot afford to pay her. Let me worry about that. I am serious, Rebecca. I need you to slow down for your sake and the baby's." She reached out and touched his face. "You take such good care of me." "That is my job. My honor." Sarah started helping at the school in September, and it made a tremendous difference. She was patient with the younger children and had a gift for explaining things in simple terms. Rebecca could sit more, rest when she needed to, and still ensure her students were learning. The baby came on October 23rd, during an early morning rainstorm. Thomas had ridden to fetch the doctor, his heart pounding with fear and excitement. Rebecca's labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Thomas thought he might lose his mind from worry. But finally, as dawn broke, a baby's cry filled the house. "You have a son," the doctor announced, placing the tiny bundle in Rebecca's arms. "A son." Thomas approached the bed slowly, awed by the sight of his wife holding their child. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was howling with impressive volume. "He has good lungs," Rebecca said with a tired laugh. "Thomas, look at him. He is perfect." Thomas sat on the edge of the bed and looked at his son, this tiny person who was part him and part Rebecca, and felt his throat tighten with emotion. "He is beautiful. You are beautiful. Thank you." "For what?" "For everything. For this, for loving me, for making a life with me." They named him Henry Thomas Sullivan, after Thomas's mother's father. Little Henry was a good baby, sleeping in long stretches and nursing well. Rebecca recovered quickly, and by November she was back at the schoolhouse part-time, bringing Henry with her in a basket. The students were enchanted with him, and Maria appointed herself his special guardian whenever Rebecca needed to work with other children. Christmas that year was celebrated at the ranch, with Miguel's family, James's family, Sarah, and several other friends joining them. The house was full of laughter and warmth, and Henry was passed around from person to person, soaking up attention. "You have built something special here," Miguel said to Thomas as they stood by the fireplace. "Not just the ranch, but a real home, a real family. We built it together. None of this would exist without all of you. Still, you were the one who had the vision, who saw what Miss Hannah needed and made it happen. That schoolhouse changed this town." Thomas looked across the room at Rebecca, who was nursing Henry in the rocking chair while talking to Mrs. Peterson. She looked up and caught his eye, smiling in that way that still made his heart skip. "She changed my life," Thomas said quietly. "I was just existing before her, going through the motions. She made me want to be better, do better. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Henry grew from baby to toddler to little boy. The school addition was completed and a second teacher was hired. Rebecca continued teaching 3 days a week, balancing motherhood and her calling with grace. When Henry was 3, Rebecca became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect and was less anxious. Their daughter, Eleanor Margaret Sullivan, arrived on a warm June morning in 1882, and from the moment she opened her eyes, she was clearly her mother's child, with the same honey-colored eyes and determined expression. "We are outnumbered now," Thomas said, holding his daughter while Henry climbed onto the bed to see his new sister. "She is tiny," Henry observed. "When will she be big enough to play? Not for a while yet, son, but you can help take care of her." "I will teach her to read," Henry announced seriously. "Like Miss Hannah teaches children," Rebecca laughed. "She is only a few hours old, Henry. Let her learn to eat first." Thomas's ranch continued to prosper. He expanded the herd, bought more land, and became one of the most successful ranchers in the area. But he never forgot where he came from, and he made sure to help others the way he had been helped. When young men came looking for work, he hired them and taught them skills. When families struggled, he found ways to assist without damaging pride. Rebecca's school became known throughout the region. Families moved to Petaluma specifically so their children could attend. The town grew and prospered, and everyone agreed that education had been the catalyst. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Thomas took Rebecca back to the creek where he had first kissed her. They left the children with Miguel's wife for the afternoon and packed a picnic just like the one from that first time. "You ever regret it?" Thomas asked as they sat by the water. "Leaving San Francisco, giving up that life." Rebecca looked at him like he had lost his mind. "Regret? Thomas, you gave me everything I ever wanted. A chance to teach, a real partnership, a family. How could I possibly regret that? I just want to make sure you are happy. That this life is enough. Enough. It is more than enough. It is everything." She took his hand. "I love you more now than the day we married, and I did not think that was possible. I love you too. You and our children are my whole world." They kissed by the creek, the same spot where their romance had truly begun, and Thomas marveled at how much life could change in 5 years. He had gone from a lonely rancher to a husband and father, from a man with an empty house to someone whose life was full of love and purpose. When Henry was 6 and Eleanor was 3, Rebecca made an announcement at dinner. "I am going to write a book." Thomas looked up from his plate. "A book?" "Yes, about teaching methods specifically for rural schools. I have been thinking about it for a while. So many teachers are working in difficult conditions, and I want to share what I have learned." "That is a wonderful idea," Thomas said. "When will you find time?" "Early mornings, before the children wake." "And I was hoping Sarah might take on more hours at the school so I could have 1 day a week to write." "Whatever you need. I think it is important work." The book took 2 years to complete. Rebecca wrote in the quiet hours of morning, pouring her experience and passion onto the page. Thomas read each chapter as she finished it, offering encouragement and insights. When she finally sent the manuscript to a publisher in San Francisco, she was terrified it would be rejected. But 3 months later, a letter arrived accepting the book for publication. Rebecca read it 3 times to make sure she understood correctly, then ran out to the barn where Thomas was working. "They want to publish it. Thomas, they are going to publish my book." He dropped his tools and caught her up in his arms, swinging her around. "Of course they are. It is brilliant work. I am so proud of you." Teaching Methods for Rural Schools by Rebecca H. Sullivan was published in the spring of 1885 and became moderately successful, selling several hundred copies throughout California and neighboring states. Rebecca received letters from teachers thanking her, telling her how the book had helped them. Each letter was precious to her, validation that her words were making a difference. The schoolhouse continued to grow. A third classroom was added when Henry started attending at age 6. He was a serious student, much like his mother, and loved learning. Alina was more mischievous, always getting into something, but she adored her big brother and followed him everywhere. In the evenings, Thomas would sit in his chair by the fireplace with Alina on one knee and Henry leaning against the other, reading to them while Rebecca graded papers or prepared lessons. These were the moments he treasured most, when everyone he loved was gathered together and safe. "Papa, tell the story about how you met Mama," Henry would often request, and Thomas would tell it again, about riding into town and hearing children's laughter, about a woman teaching under a tree who captured his heart, about building a schoolhouse and building a life. "And then you got married and had us," Alina would chime in, always delighted by the ending. "That is right, sweetheart, and then we had you and you made everything perfect." When Thomas was 38 and Rebecca 32, they welcomed their third child, a son they named James Daniel Sullivan, after their friend James, who had helped build the schoolhouse all those years ago. James the elder was honored to tears, and his own children were excited to have a baby named after their father. "You have blessed me twice," James told Thomas at the baby's christening. "Once by giving me a chance when others would not, and now by giving your son my name. I will never forget it." "You have been a true friend, James. I could not imagine a better namesake for my boy." Little James was a happy baby who grew into an easy toddler. With 3 children, the house was constantly full of noise and activity. Rebecca cut her teaching down to 2 days a week, and Sarah took on more responsibility at the school. Rebecca was content with the arrangement, enjoying more time at home while still maintaining her connection to teaching. The ranch continued to thrive. Thomas took on a partner to help manage the expanded operation, a young man named David Stone who reminded Thomas of himself at that age, hungry and determined. Thomas taught him everything he knew, and David proved to be an excellent rancher. On their 10th anniversary, the town threw a celebration honoring Thomas and Rebecca. Mayor Davies, older now and with even larger mutton chops, gave a speech about the transformation of Petaluma. 10 years ago, we were a dusty stop on the road to somewhere else. Now we are a destination, a place families want to live. And it all started with 2 people, a teacher who would not give up and a rancher who believed in her dream. Thomas and Rebecca Sullivan built more than a schoolhouse. They built a community. The crowd cheered and Thomas pulled Rebecca close. She had tears streaming down her face. "We did do something good, did we not?" she whispered. "We did something great," he corrected. "Look at all these people, these families." The children who learned to read, who went on to make something of themselves. William is training to be a lawyer. Maria is a teacher herself now. That is your legacy, Rebecca. Our legacy. I could not have done any of it without you. They danced that night under the stars, and Thomas thought about the lonely man he had been riding into Petaluma 10 years earlier. That man would not have believed this future was possible, this happiness, this sense of completion. "What are you thinking about?" Rebecca asked, her head resting on his shoulder. "How grateful I am. For you, for our children, for this life. I would not change a single thing, neither would I, though I would not mind if James slept through the night occasionally." Thomas laughed. "He is only 2, give him time." As their children grew, Thomas made sure they understood the value of education and hard work. Henry helped on the ranch during summer, learning the business. Alina showed an early aptitude for teaching and would often play school with her younger brother. Little James was still finding his way, but he had a gentle nature and a way with animals. When Rebecca turned 35, she received a letter from a university in San Francisco. They had read her book and wanted to know if she would come give a lecture on rural education methods. Rebecca was astounded. "They want me to speak at a university. Thomas, I am just a country school teacher. You are an expert in your field who published a respected book. Of course they want to hear from you. But I have never given a formal lecture. What if I say something foolish?" Thomas took her hands. "You stand in front of a classroom full of children every week and teach them brilliantly. This is no different, just an older audience. You can do this, Rebecca. I believe in you." So Rebecca went to San Francisco, her first time back since she had left 10 years earlier. Thomas and the children stayed home to manage the ranch and school. She was gone for 5 days, and Thomas missed her terribly, realizing how completely she had become woven into every part of his life. When she returned, she was glowing with excitement. "Thomas, it was wonderful. They asked me so many questions, and I think I actually helped them understand the challenges rural teachers face. They want me to come back next year to teach a whole course. That would be weeks away from home." Rebecca's excitement dimmed. "I know, it is probably too much. I should decline." But Thomas shook his head. "No, you should do it. We will manage here. This is an incredible opportunity, Rebecca. You have to take it. Are you sure? It would be 6 weeks, maybe 8, I am sure. You have supported my dreams for years. Now it is my turn to support yours." So the next year, Rebecca went to San Francisco for 8 weeks to teach a course on rural education at the university. Thomas managed the children and the ranch with help from Miguel's wife and Sarah. It was hard being apart, but they wrote letters every day, and Rebecca came home every other weekend. When the course ended, Rebecca had offers from 2 other universities to teach similar classes, but she turned them down. "My place is here," she told Thomas. "With you, with our children, with the students who need me in Petaluma. The lectures are wonderful opportunities, but they are not my life. This is my life." Thomas kissed her, understanding the sacrifice she was making but also knowing it was the right choice for their family. "You could do both, you know. Teach here most of the year, travel to lecture a few weeks at a time. Maybe someday, but right now I want to be home." They settled into a rhythm that worked for everyone. Rebecca taught at the schoolhouse, occasionally traveled to give lectures, and wrote another book, this one about parenting and education. Thomas ran the ranch with David's help and made sure he was present for every important moment in his children's lives. Henry grew into a thoughtful young man who loved both ranching and books. At 15, he told his parents he wanted to become a veterinarian, combining his love of animals with his desire to help others. Thomas and Rebecca supported the decision, starting to save for veterinary school. Eleanor, at 12, was already helping Sarah at the schoolhouse, teaching younger children to read. She had her mother's gift for explaining things and her father's patience. Everyone said she would be a master teacher someday. James, at 8, was still finding his way but showed signs of artistic talent. He was always drawing animals and landscapes, his sketches remarkably good for his age. "We have raised good children," Rebecca said one night as she and Thomas sat on their porch, watching the sunset. The children were inside, supposedly doing homework but more likely playing together. "We have. They are kind, smart, hardworking. That is all because of you, because of both of us. You taught them integrity and generosity. I just taught them reading and arithmetic. You taught them much more than that. You taught them that education matters, that dreams are worth pursuing, that they can be anything they want to be." On their 15th anniversary, Thomas surprised Rebecca with a trip back to the creek where they had first kissed. Over the years, he had purchased the land that surrounded it, wanting to preserve the spot that meant so much to them. Now he revealed that he had built a small cabin there, a private retreat just for the two of them. "Thomas, this is beautiful." Rebecca explored the cabin, which had a main room with a fireplace, a small bedroom, and a porch overlooking the creek. "When did you do this?" "David and I have been working on it for 6 months, whenever we had free time. I wanted us to have a place that was just ours, where we could escape when life gets too busy." They spent the weekend at the cabin, talking and walking and remembering. 15 years of marriage had deepened their love into something solid and enduring. They knew each other's habits and quirks, could finish each other's sentences, and still found new things to talk about every day. "You remember how scared I was when you first proposed?" Rebecca asked as they sat by the creek. "We barely knew each other, and you were asking me to trust you with my whole future. I remember, you said yes anyway. Because something in me knew you were the one. Call it intuition, call it fate, I just knew." Thomas pulled her close. "Best decision you ever made." "Second best." "The best was coming to Petaluma in the first place. Everything good in my life started that day. The ranch became one of the largest and most successful in the region. Thomas employed over 20 men, many of whom had been with him for years. He was known as a fair boss who paid well and treated his workers with respect. When David announced he was getting married, Thomas deeded him 50 acres of land as a wedding present, helping him start his own ranch. Rebecca's schoolhouse educated hundreds of children over the years. Many of them went on to college, something that would have been impossible without the education she provided. Several became teachers themselves, spreading her methods to other communities. Her books were used in teacher training programs across the West. But their proudest moments were not the professional successes. They were watching Henry graduate from veterinary school at 22 and return to Petaluma to open his own practice. They were seeing Alina take over as head teacher at the schoolhouse when Rebecca decided to retire at 42. They were witnessing James's first art show in San Francisco, his paintings of ranch life praised for their beauty and authenticity. "We did something right," Thomas said at James's art show, watching their youngest son accept congratulations from patrons. "We loved them," Rebecca said simply. "We believed in them and we loved them. That is all any child needs." Thomas and Rebecca grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing down. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger with time, weathering challenges and celebrating triumphs together. Thomas sold the ranch when he was 55, tired of the constant demands and ready for a quieter life. He and Rebecca spent their days reading, taking long walks, and visiting with their grandchildren as Henry, Alina, and James all married and started families. The schoolhouse that Thomas built over 30 years earlier was still standing, though it had been expanded and renovated multiple times. A plaque by the front door read, "Founded by Rebecca H. Sullivan in 1878, built by Thomas Sullivan. Education lights the way forward." On their 30th anniversary, Thomas and Rebecca returned to the oak tree where Rebecca had first taught her students. The tree was older now, some of its branches gone, but it still stood strong. "You ever miss it?" Thomas asked. "The teaching?" "Sometimes. But I had my time and I made a difference. Now it is Alina's turn and other young teachers. The world keeps moving forward. Because of you. Because you refused to give up when things were hard." Rebecca leaned her head on his shoulder. "Because you built me a schoolhouse and gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams." They sat under the tree for a long time, remembering the children who had learned there, the lives that had been changed, the community that had grown around one woman's determination and one man's generosity. Thomas took Rebecca's hand, fingers interlacing naturally after 3 decades of practice. I would do it all again, every single day. So would I. I love you, Thomas Sullivan. I love you too, Rebecca Sullivan. Always have, always will. The sun set over Petaluma, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. In their comfortable home, surrounded by the fruits of their labor and love, Thomas and Rebecca Sullivan sat together and watched the day end, grateful for every moment they had been given, every choice that had led them to each other, every day they had built together. Their story had started with a woman teaching children under a tree and a man who saw what was needed. It had grown into a lifetime of love, partnership, and purpose. The schoolhouse still stood, a testament to what could be accomplished when two people worked together toward a common dream. Their children and grandchildren carried forward their values of education, hard work, and compassion. And in the heart of Petaluma, California, their legacy lived on, touching lives they would never meet, influencing futures they would never see, proving that one act of generosity, one moment of courage, could change the world.